Welcome. Good evening, everyone. We have now opened the meeting and we want to let you know you're in the right place to participate in EPA's virtual PFAS community engagement meeting for Region 1. To minimize background noise for everyone, you are all muted. If you require technical or Zoom connection assistance, please email info@pfascommunityengagement.org. We have tech standing by to assist you. Today's presentation will be followed by a listening session, and you'll have the opportunity to provide feedback directly with us. And I think we are just after 6 o'clock, so we're ready to get started. Welcome to those of you joining us virtually via Zoom or over the phone. And thank you all for taking your time out of your busy lives to be with us tonight. We've worked to accommodate virtual participation and to provide meaningful interpretation for tonight. For those of you joining us virtually, if you're having any trouble, again, please reach out to info@pfascommunityengagement.org. And now I'm going to turn it over to Grace on the next slide.
We begin today's virtual community engagement session. We'd like to take a few minutes to review the webinar platform. First, a reminder that today's webinar is being recorded. All attendees are muted and in listen-only mode until the feedback portion of this session. During the second half of the session, we will open it up for feedback from individuals who have signed up ahead of time to speak. We'll first hear from those who signed up ahead of time to share verbal feedback, and then, if time permitting, we'll have an opportunity for others to share comments. We'll share specific instructions on how you'll be able to give us feedback using your device mic during that portion of the session. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of Zoom controls. You can adjust your audio and mic settings in the lower left corner of the Zoom navigation bar. You'll use the raise hand function if we have time at the end of the session for additional public feedback. Click Show Captions to turn on English closed captioning, and you can select what language you want your audio in using the interpretation button. Next slide. There is an English and Spanish audio stream available for this session. To access the translated stream, you must listen via online audio in Zoom, not via the call-in number. Please click the interpretation icon on the navigation bar in the lower part of the Zoom window to access your translation options. Select your preferred language, either English or Spanish. If you are listening in Spanish, it is recommended to mute original audio. This option is also located in the translation button. And next slide. If you, just one more time, if you need technical assistance with the Zoom platform, please email info@pfascommunityengagement.org and we can assist you. So I will turn it back over to Kelsey at this time.
Thank you, Grace. So before we begin, I just want to highlight that by participating in today's online event, you acknowledge and consent that your name, video, image, or phone number may be visible to others in the live meeting, as well as captured in the recording. Next slide. Thank you again for joining us tonight. As you know, tonight we're going to focus on a class of chemicals known as PFAS, and we plan to both describe some work EPA, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, is doing on these chemicals, and then to hear from many of you. So before we begin, I just want to share a bit about myself. I'll be your moderator for today's session. My name is Kelsey Dunville, and I work for EPA Region 1 as a Community Involvement Coordinator. I've worked in our Office of Public Affairs here in Region 1 for 15 years. It's been my job, it will be my job tonight to keep our session organized and moving along. And I'm here tonight because I, along with my team, spend a lot of time working on the ground in your communities, specifically on Superfund sites, sharing information about EPA's work. I've worked with many of you over the years and anticipate continuing to work with you on EPA's efforts around PFAS in your communities. Thanks again for joining us. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to just share our basic plan for the evening. So right now, as you can tell, we're starting with some housekeeping and introductions. Next, we will hear a few words from EPA Region 1's Regional Administrator, David Cash, who also serves as a co-chair of the EPA's PFAS Council. Then we'll hear a bit from Emma Forbes, who will share more about per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, and also about EPA's work under the PFAS Strategic Roadmap. Following these remarks, we are looking forward to hearing from many of you during the listening session portion of today's event. We'll share more details about how you can participate in the listening session when we get to that portion of tonight's agenda. But next, I would like to introduce you to David Cash, EPA's Regional Administrator for Region 1 in New England. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Kelsey. And first of all, and most importantly, thanks to all of you who are joining us tonight for this important conversation. My name is David Cash, and I'm the Regional Administrator for EPA's Region 1, New England. Our region includes 6 states and 10 tribal nations. In addition, as Kelsey noted, to my role as Regional Administrator, I'm also the National Co-Chair of EPA's PFAS Council. Prior to coming to EPA, I was the Dean of the John W. McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at UMass Boston. And I also spent a decade in Massachusetts state government, where I held a range of different positions, including Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection and Commissioner of the Department of Public Utilities. In a number of these different roles, I focused on issues like PFAS. I will also say I'm a parent, dad of 2 kids who are now in their 20s, but issues about what's safe for them is always front of mind in raising them. We're here tonight to talk about a group of chemicals, as Kelsey mentioned, called PFAS, as well as the efforts that EPA is taking or considering to address these chemicals. And then, most importantly, we want to hear from you. You'll hear more from my colleagues about this in a few minutes, but PFAS are widely used, long-lasting chemicals, often called forever chemicals, because they don't break down over time. There are thousands of different PFAS. Studies show that certain PFAS can have serious public health and environmental impacts. And we continue to learn more about the public health, the human health and environmental effects of these chemicals. EPA is working to address these chemicals using our PFAS Strategic Roadmap, our plan to research, restrict, and remediate them. And I want to acknowledge at the outset that the topic we're discussing tonight can be challenging, partly because the issue we're here to talk about can be complex, and also because many of you are likely here because PFAS has already impacted you, your family, your community, or because you're concerned that PFAS may impact you in the future. Region 1 continues to be actively engaged in PFAS efforts throughout New England communities. Our former Deputy Regional Administrator, Deb Zaro, was a founding member of EPA's PFAS Council and served as the Council's co-chair until her retirement last year. The states in Region 1 have been at the forefront of PFAS work and are seen as leaders across the country. And we want to acknowledge all of the work completed by our state partners and want to ensure that we continue to work together to address the effects of PFAS contamination on our New England communities. These communities across New England were some of the first in the nation where the presence of PFAS was discovered. Communities around the former Pease Air Force Base, current and former manufacturing facilities in Vermont and New Hampshire, and farms in Maine, to name a few, have been actively engaged on this issue for many years. Many of you that have joined us tonight continue to advocate for your families and your neighbors on this important issue. I'd like to focus now on the core group at EPA that is working on PFAS, which is our EPA Council on PFAS, or PFAS Council, where I serve as one of the co-chairs, as I mentioned. One of Administrator Regan's first actions when he joined EPA in 2021 was to create EPA's PFAS Council. And in creating the council, Administrator Regan asked the council to develop an ambitious plan of action to advance science and research, to restrict these dangerous chemicals from getting into the environment, and to remediate the problem in communities across the country. The plan the council developed is known as the PFAS Strategic Roadmap, our whole of agency approach to addressing PFAS. And you'll hear more about the specifics of the roadmap in a few minutes. The roadmap sets timelines by which EPA plans to take specific actions across each of our major program areas. In addition to these program-specific priority actions, we also included a set of actions that cut across our specific program areas. One of these critical areas is on engaging directly with communities. A key reason we're holding this session tonight is due to a recommendation from EPA's National Environmental Justice Advisory Council that we engage with communities in each EPA region. And so my EPA colleagues and I are interested to hear how PFAS has impacted you. The feedback you provide today will help us better understand what you, your family, and your community are experiencing in order to keep us focused on protecting human health and the environment and addressing PFAS contamination. Your feedback will also help us better communicate about the risks of PFAS, including information about what PFAS are, how they're used, and how they can impact our health. One of the themes you'll hear today is the importance of working across the EPA and also with our partners in other federal agencies, with tribal nations, with states, and with the public to tackle this significant challenge. We welcome feedback on ways we can work more effectively with these partners. Another critical area of focus for us is to empower meaningful action on behalf of all people who are impacted by these chemicals, regardless of their zip code or the color of their skin. A priority area for us at EPA is to better understand how PFAS contamination may disproportionately impact communities already overburdened by environmental hazards and contamination, and what actions EPA or its partners can take. Next, you'll hear about the specific actions EPA has taken and plans to take, and we welcome your feedback on these actions or on additional actions you'd like us to consider. So, thank you all again for being here today, and I look forward to hearing from many of you during our listening session later this evening. And now, I'd like to turn it to Region 1's lead point of contact on PFAS, Emma Forbes, to spend some time walking through EPA's PFAS Strategic Roadmap and setting the stage for our listening session. Emma?
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emma Forbes. I work for EPA Region 1 in our Superfund and Emergency Management Division. I work as a remedial project manager, overseeing the cleanup of Superfund sites throughout New England. An additional responsibility of mine is to serve as our point of contact for Region 1 on PFAS issues, and to work closely with the PFAS Council to ensure we are coordinating effectively on PFAS. Tonight, I will share some information about the work EPA has done under the PFAS Strategic Roadmap, highlight actions we are planning for the future, and listen as you all share your experiences with PFAS to inform our work in Region 1 and across the country. Next slide, please. As Regional Administrator Cash shared earlier, in April 2021, EPA Administrator Michael Regan established the EPA Council on PFAS and charged it to develop a bold, strategic, whole-of-EPA approach to protect public health and the environment from the impacts of PFAS. The Council, comprised of senior technical and policy leaders from across EPA program offices and regional offices, is co-chaired by EPA's Assistant Administrator for Water, Radhika Fox, and our New England Regional Administrator, David Cash. The Council met Administrator Regan's call through the PFAS Strategic Roadmap, which was released in October of 2021. The roadmap does several things. It includes clear timelines for concrete actions from 2021 to 2024. It fills a critical gap in federal leadership, setting a basic floor of federal protection across the country. It supports states' ongoing efforts to tackle PFAS by building critical science, methods, tools, and technologies. And it builds on EPA's commitment to restore scientific integrity by making science the foundation of our work. I'll return to the specific commitments in our PFAS roadmap in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Before I share more about EPA's PFAS roadmap, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances and why we are concerned about them. I will refer to per and polyfluoroalkyl substances as PFAS throughout the presentation. PFAS capture a large group of synthetic chemicals made by humans that consist of chains of carbon atoms surrounded by fluorine atoms. There are thousands of different PFAS with a variety of chemical structures. Some of these chemicals have been more widely used and studied than others. As examples, this slide shows the chemical structure of two of the most widely used and studied chemicals in the PFAS group, known as PFOA and PFOS. PFAS have been used in homes, businesses, and industries since the 1940s. They have been and are used by many industries and found in many consumer products due to their useful properties, which include stain and water resistance, and their beneficial role in firefighting foam used to extinguish fuel fires. Due to their widespread use, PFAS have been found in soil, water, fish, and air across the country and around the world. Surveys conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show that most people in the United States have been exposed to PFAS, including measurable levels of certain PFAS in human blood. Most known exposures to PFAS are relatively low, but some can be high, particularly when people are exposed to a concentrated source over long periods of time. PFAS are a concern to human health due to their known or suspected toxicity. Their health effects are better known for some PFAS, such as PFOA and PFOS, but much less well known for others. I'll describe a bit later some of the work that EPA is doing to improve our scientific understanding. Finally, scientific research has shown that PFAS can resist decomposition in the environment and in the human body due to their unique properties. Next slide, please. The life cycle diagram shown on this slide shows some of the ways in which PFAS are used and can enter the environment. I know that some of the text is very small, but the picture helps to illustrate a few major ways that PFAS can enter the environment and potentially impact human health. These ways include discharges of PFAS pollution from manufacturing facilities, discharges of PFAS-containing firefighting foam, PFAS entering wastewater treatment facilities from upstream sources, and PFAS applied to agricultural fields as a component of biosolids. Biosolids are the solid organic matter left over from the wastewater treatment process. Through these significant and diverse pathways, PFAS contamination presents unique challenges. EPA's approach toward PFAS takes this uniqueness into account and is centered around the following principles. First, consider the life cycle of PFAS, including their unique properties, the ubiquity of their uses, and the multiple pathways for exposure. Second, get upstream of the problem. EPA is bringing deeper focus to preventing PFAS from entering the environment in the first place, a foundational step to reducing the exposure and potential risks of future PFAS contamination. Third, hold polluters accountable for their actions and for PFAS remediation efforts. Fourth, ensure science-based decision-making. EPA is investing in scientific research to fill gaps in our understanding of PFAS. And fifth, prioritize protection of disadvantaged communities. When taking action on PFAS, EPA is ensuring that disadvantaged communities have equitable access to solutions. And this principle of protecting communities is a critical reason why we are here tonight. Next slide, please. The risks posed by PFAS demand that EPA attack the PFAS problem on multiple fronts at the same time. The actions described in our strategic roadmap each represent important and meaningful steps to safeguard communities from PFAS contamination. And we believe that these actions will build upon one another and lead to more enduring and protective solutions. EPA's integrated approach to PFAS is focused on three goals. First is research. EPA is investing in research, development, and innovation to increase understanding of PFAS exposures and toxicities, human health and ecological effects, and actions we can take to incorporate the best available science. Second is restrict. EPA is pursuing a comprehensive approach to proactively prevent PFAS from entering air, land, and water at levels that can adversely impact human health and the environment. And third, remediate. EPA is broadening and accelerating the cleanup of PFAS contamination. Next slide, please. In the PFAS roadmap, EPA committed to issuing a public report on its PFAS progress each year. In November of 2022, EPA released its first one-year progress report, summarizing the critical actions that we've taken. Since the roadmap's release in October 2021, EPA has taken the following actions, which I'll talk about in greater detail later on in the presentation. Apologies for some technical difficulties on my end. So since October of 2021, we proposed to designate 2 PFAS as hazardous substances under CERCLA or Superfund. We've released drinking water health advisories for 4 PFAS. We've laid the foundation for enhancing data on PFAS. We've begun distributing $10 billion in funding to address emerging contaminants under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We've expanded the scientific understanding of PFAS and translated this science into EPA's efforts. We've proactively used enforcement tools to better identify and address PFAS releases. And we've released a set of PFAS analytic tools to publicly share data on PFAS in communities. And finally, We have engaged with federal partners and the public. EPA's PFAS work was informed by public webinars, stakeholder meetings, congressional testimony, and engagement with EPA's federal advisory committees. EPA is also coordinating with its federal agency partners in the Biden-Harris administration to harness the collective knowledge, experience, and capacity of the federal government to address PFAS. In addition to highlighting the actions that EPA has taken, our one-year progress report also identified a series of upcoming priority actions for 2023, such as proposing a national drinking water standard, which we just announced last month, taking final action on the proposed CERCLA designation for PFOA and PFOS, continuing to improve chemical data and safety, restricting upstream PFAS discharges to waterways, addressing PFAS in biosolids, and engaging with communities like we're doing here tonight. I will cover each of these upcoming actions in a few moments. Next slide, please. Over the next few slides, I will cover some program-specific commitments from the various offices here at EPA. As I highlighted earlier, science and research are the foundation of EPA's work on PFAS. EPA is working to improve the scientific understanding of PFAS in three primary areas. First, we are working to develop and validate methods to detect and measure PFAS in the environment. Second, we are working to advance the science to assess human health and environmental risks from PFAS. Our scientists are developing human health toxicity assessments for additional PFAS, compiling and summarizing available and relevant scientific information, identifying PFAS sources, the way PFAS move in the environment, and the pathways by which people can be exposed to PFAS, and characterizing how PFAS exposure may contribute to cumulative impacts on communities. And third, we are working to evaluate and develop technologies for reducing PFAS in the environment. This work will inform decisions on drinking water and wastewater treatment, contaminated site cleanup and remediation, air emission controls, and end-of-life materials management. Next slide, please. The next area that I'll cover is our work to ensure chemical safety. EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention is working on many actions to restrict PFAS, and most of these actions fall under two laws, the Toxic Substances Control Act, or you may know it as TSCA, and the Toxics Release Inventory Program, which you might know as the TRI program. First of all, EPA is working to deepen our understanding of PFAS categories through the National PFAS Testing Strategy, which EPA released in October of 2021. The testing strategy is a major step towards the game-changing goal of breaking PFAS into distinct categories to direct research, amplify regulatory action, and accelerate technology and policy solutions to restrict and remediate PFAS. Second, EPA is working under its TSCA authorities to strengthen EPA oversight over both new and existing PFAS. EPA is working to ensure a robust review process for new PFAS to ensure that chemicals are safe before they enter commerce. And we're working to review existing PFAS under TSCA to ensure they are being used in ways that do not present concerns and to prevent resumed production of legacy PFAS or their use in new ways. For example, in late January, EPA proposed a rule that would ensure that any discontinued use of certain PFAS cannot re-enter the marketplace without EPA review. Third, EPA is collecting data and improving reporting on how PFAS are used and released. Under TSCA, we are working on a final rule to better characterize the sources and quantities of manufactured PFAS in the United States. This final rule would collect significant new information on chemical quantities, byproducts, worker exposures, and disposal methods. Under the Toxics Release Inventory, we are working to enhance PFAS reporting by proposing a rule to remove exemptions and exclusions from reporting. Last December, EPA released a proposed rule to enhance Toxics Release Inventory PFAS reporting. If finalized, this rule would enhance the data available to the public so EPA and other federal, tribal, state, and local agencies can use these data to best protect health in the environment. And fourth, EPA is working to reduce the presence of PFAS in products purchased by the federal government. In December 2021, President Biden signed an executive order that will reestablish the federal government as a leader in sustainability. A critical element of the executive order is to promote sustainable federal purchasing, which includes prioritizing the purchase of products without added PFAS. EPA is taking a leadership role in this work. Next slide, please. Next, we will cover our Office of Water, where we are taking an extensive set of actions to restrict PFAS through EPA's programs to protect drinking water and our lakes, rivers, and streams. First, let's take a look at drinking water. On March 14th, EPA took a key step to protect public health by proposing the first ever national drinking water standard for 6 PFAS, fulfilling a foundational commitment in the PFAS Strategic Roadmap. Through this proposed rule, EPA is taking a major step to protect public health from PFAS pollution, leveraging the latest science and complementing state efforts to limit PFAS by proposing to establish legally enforceable levels for 6 PFAS known to occur in drinking water. The rule is now open for public comment until May 30th, and you can learn more about the proposed rule and about how to access the formal public comment docket on our website, which is www.epa.gov/PFAS. EPA recently held 2 webinars on the proposed rule, and we also made the webinar recordings and presentation materials available on our website. We will be holding a virtual public hearing on the proposed rule on May 4th. You can learn more about these opportunities at our website, which again is epa.gov/PFAS. For drinking water, EPA is also working to improve drinking water data through monitoring, toxicity assessments, and health advisories. EPA is currently taking important steps to monitor drinking water in communities across the country through our 5th Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, or UCMR5. This program is testing for 29 PFAS chemicals from 2023 to 2025 in thousands of drinking water systems nationwide. You may remember that an earlier round of EPA monitoring from 2013 to 2015 helped us discover PFAS contamination and led to significant state and local actions to safeguard our drinking water. With our latest rule, we are taking it a step further. We'll be testing for nearly 5 times more PFAS at significantly more water systems and using methods that can detect PFAS at much lower levels. These new data will be critical in improving our understanding of how communities, including low-income communities and communities of color, may be exposed to PFAS in their drinking water. As I mentioned earlier, in June 2022, EPA released 4 health advisories, interim health advisories for PFOA and PFOS, and final health advisories for PFBS and for Genix chemicals. Under the Clean Water Act, EPA is working to develop national technology-based discharge limits for industries that use PFAS through our Effluent Limitations Guidelines program. In January of 2023, EPA released its final Effluent Limitation Guidelines, Plan 15, which outlines key steps towards addressing PFAS discharges across a range of industrial categories. Also under the Clean Water Act, we're working to address PFAS in permitting and through analytical methods, water quality criteria, and fish advisories. We are working to leverage the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, wastewater permitting program to improve monitoring and to reduce PFAS discharges to waterways. In December 2022, EPA released new guidance to states describing how to leverage permits and pretreatment programs to increase monitoring, including at known or suspected discharges of PFAS. This guidance will enable states to take appropriate steps to restrict PFAS at their source, collect important data on PFAS discharges, and enable communities to work closely with their state permitting authorities to take action where discharges may occur. We are also working on improved analytical methods to measure more PFAS in more places. In April of 2022, EPA released draft aquatic life water quality criteria for public comment for PFOA and PFOS, which reflect the latest peer-reviewed scientific knowledge regarding the effects of these chemicals on freshwater aquatic organisms. We are also working to enhance data availability on PFAS in fish tissue to help states and tribes to set PFAS fish advisories. And finally, as I referenced earlier, we're working to evaluate the risks of PFAS in biosolids. We will be finalizing a risk assessment for PFOA and PFOS that will serve as the basis for determining whether regulation of these two chemicals in biosolids is appropriate. Next slide, please. This slide covers two of our program offices, our Office of Land and Emergency Management, which houses EPA's cleanup programs, and our Office of Air and Radiation, where our team of experts work to address air pollution. First, we'll talk about a specific action that I highlighted earlier under CERCLA, which is the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, or more commonly known as Superfund. In September 2022, EPA published a proposed rule to designate PFOA and PFOS as hazardous substances under CERCLA, or Superfund. If finalized, this rule would require facilities across the country to report PFOA and PFOS releases that meet or exceed the reportable quantity for these substances, enhance the ability of federal, tribal nations, state, and local authorities to obtain information regarding the location and extent of releases, enhance the ability of EPA and other agencies to respond to release or threats of releases of PFOA and PFOS, and it would help establish national consistency in the evaluation and cleanup of PFOA and PFOS, and encourage better waste management practices. As identified in the roadmap, EPA intends to take final action on this proposed rule in 2023, and will continue to work closely with stakeholders to better understand equity concerns. As an additional step, EPA anticipates issuing an advance notice of proposed rulemaking in the coming days to seek public comment on designating other PFAS chemicals as CERCLA hazardous substances. Next, under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, EPA plans to propose two regulations in 2023. First, EPA plans to develop a proposed rule to add specific PFAS to the list of hazardous constituents, which would mean these PFAS are subject to RCRA corrective action requirements. Second, EPA plans to clarify that emerging contaminants such as PFAS can be cleaned up through the RCRA corrective action process. The third item on this slide highlights EPA's commitment to take significant steps towards updating our research and guidance on PFAS destruction and disposal. EPA published interim guidance in December of 2020. In that document, we highlighted significant uncertainties about the effectiveness of some PFAS destruction and disposal technologies. We have a deadline to update this guidance by December 2023. Finally, our Office of Air and Radiation is also taking steps toward restricting PFAS by building the technical foundation for potential Clean Air Act regulation. We are working to identify sources, to develop monitoring approaches and information on mitigation technologies, and to increase our understanding of the fate and transport of PFAS air emissions. This work will support future decisions on whether to designate PFAS as hazardous air pollutants under the Clean Air Act. Next slide, please. No conversation about PFAS is complete without highlighting the transformational investments being made in America's water infrastructure through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the bill, signed by President Biden in November 2021. The bill provides the single largest investment in clean water that the federal government has ever made. The bill will build on research, restrictions, and remediation called for in the PFAS Roadmap by providing $10 billion for communities impacted by PFAS and other emerging contaminants. The bill builds on 3 of EPA's existing water finance programs, but focuses them specifically on PFAS and emerging contaminants. And it provides all $10 billion of these funds without a requirement for state matching funds, and all funds are provided as either grants or principal forgiveness loans. Of the $10 billion, $4 billion will flow through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. $1 billion will flow through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. $5 billion will provide grants to address emerging contaminants in small and disadvantaged communities. In February of 2023, EPA announced the availability of $2 billion from this program to address emerging contaminants, including PFAS, in drinking water across the country. These funds will be allocated to states and territories and will promote access to safe and clean water in small, rural, and disadvantaged communities while supporting local economies. EPA is committed to maximizing the impact of these funds in addressing urgent water challenges facing communities. We are thrilled that these funds will enable communities to invest in PFAS treatment solutions, while EPA continues to take action to research, restrict, and remediate PFAS consistent with our PFAS Strategic Roadmap. So I've covered a lot of information in this presentation tonight, and I would encourage you all to visit our website, which again is epa.gov/PFAS. There you can find all of this information and much more on what actions EPA has taken and plans to take on PFAS. The website is regularly updated and will have the latest information related to new rulemakings and other actions. With that, I would like to thank you all for listening tonight, and I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Kelsey, to talk more about the next part of our session where we will hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. So in a few minutes, we look forward to providing an opportunity for those of you who are interested to share your feedback with us. But before we do, I wanted to provide you with a little bit of background. So first of all, I want to emphasize that the feedback you share with us tonight will help inform future actions EPA takes towards helping communities address PFAS contamination. One important thing to note is that the feedback you share with us all will not be considered as part of the formal comment process for any specific action EPA is taking consistent with EPA's PFAS Strategic Roadmap. If you have comments on any specific action we're taking, such as a proposed regulation, you should provide those comments as part of the formal public comment process. You can learn more about those actions we have taken at our website. Again, that's www.epa.gov/PFAS. One other question you may have is what EPA plans to do with the feedback you share with us tonight. First of all, we will not be responding to individual comments we receive. However, we do plan to take back everything we hear from you tonight, as well as the feedback we gather at the other regional listening sessions we are holding, and as well as a session we held for tribes on April 6th to inform EPA's future work on PFAS. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Grace at LRG to share some additional details about how our listening session will work.
Thank you, Kelsey. We will now be opening this session for public feedback. First, we'll hear from individuals who signed up during the registration process. Before we get to those folks, a couple of tips on how to share verbal feedback. If you signed up ahead of time, you'll receive a message in Zoom, and you'll need to click on that message. That will give you speaking permission. When you have speaker permissions, we'll call your name. At that point, you should unmute and begin speaking. You are welcome to turn on your camera, or you can keep it off. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes. And I also wanted to mention that if you have trouble clicking on the pop-up in Zoom or unmuting yourself, you can email us at info@pfascommunityengagement.org, and we can try and help resolve your issue. And even if we're unable to help you before, and we get through all of the speakers that signed up for public feedback ahead of time, we expect that we'll have the opportunity to open it up to anyone on this call who would like to give feedback towards the end of the session. So with that, I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Kelsey, and just sometimes it can take us a few moments to get our speakers ready. So please be patient as we pull up speakers who have signed up for public feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. It looks like Marguerite is ready. So Marguerite, if you're there, feel free to begin. You are muted, Marguerite.
My name is Marguerite Edelman, and I'm the coordinator of the Vermont PFAS Military Poisons Coalition, which is a project of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom's Earth Democracy Committee. The EPA's proposed drinking water limits on 6 PFAS do not go far enough. We support them, but we believe more needs to be done. At least 14,000 PFAS have been identified, and the few PFAS that have been studied are toxic. We know that all PFAS are persistent with one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. And in order to protect human health and the environment, The EPA needs to ban all forms of PFAS as soon as possible. Waiting for a miraculous remediation system is not practical, affordable, or even scalable on a large scale. Because of the EPA's chemical by chemical approach, public health and the environment are in crisis. We must regulate PFAS as a class of chemicals and ban all but essential uses of PFAS. The EPA's PFAS water quality standards are not comprehensive, and they take too long to enact, are too confusing with a health hazard index for 4 forms of PFAS, and don't set PFOA and PFOS at limits needed to protect people from harm. We know that the health advisory limit is much lower. We just can't detect that low at this point. Why can't the EPA do what the European Chemical Agency, ECHA, has done in February of 2023? They're proposing restrictions setting out the pathway for the EU to ban production and import of over 10,000 persistent PFAS chemicals. This ban is truly extensive and the first of its kind. 108 companies have already signed on to phasing out PFAS chemicals. The precautionary principle is truly needed in the US. We need to move the burden of proof for potentially harmful actions to industry and government. And when there are threats of serious damage to public health and the environment, scientific uncertainty must be resolved in favor of prevention and protection of people and planet. Thank you so much, and I hope to see more.
Thank you, Marguerite. It looks like Laureen is ready. Feel free to unmute.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that you did this. I'm really happy with what you're doing. You've laid a good foundation. My name is Laureen Allen. I live in Merrimack, New Hampshire. I am the one of the co-founders of Merrimack Citizens for Clean Water. We learned in 2016 that the water we believed to be safe was contaminated from single-bane performance plastics, PTFE coating of fabric, or water and land and environmental contamination came from and still comes from their air stacks. So air, water, biosolids, all of the pieces that you mentioned are key. Back in 2018, the EPA engaged in a session here in Exeter, New Hampshire. I was really pleased to work with Andrea Miko and Kristen Mello and some of our friends from Cape Cod to help make that happen. And Alex Dunn was a great help to us in saying, hey, we need a seat at the table. So we went there, and we know that everyone heard way more than they bargained for. That's on video. If you haven't watched it, please watch it. Those asks back then are still pertinent now. And while you're laying a great foundation, you know, I have to say, I apply it to this case study. That's the best way I can filter it. Everything that I say in general, every community across the nation in the National PFAS Contamination Coalition would agree wholeheartedly, or details are different, or state approaches are different, but or asks are the same. And you know that, I know you know that. So I know you're familiar with New Hampshire. You know, we were on right up there with the testing and monitoring from the beginning. DES has done a phenomenal job trying to ask for EPA ORD assistance and really tracking, monitoring, and getting data. Well, you know, monitoring and testing do not solve the problem. 7 years into this nightmare of 5 communities at least that are heavily contaminated with this. And what we find is our polluter is running the investigation. Any accountability or responsibility they take is premised with, well, we don't agree that we're responsible, but we agree to. They've restricted our rights, they've enhanced theirs, and it's been horrible. You know, it's been 7 years of this. So for all the work that we've done in New Hampshire, it's all been citizen driven. They haven't done anything voluntarily. We have passed legislation. We've come as far as we can, but we need the EPA's backup. We really do, for cleanup, for hazardous substance designation, and even in the regulatory that you do. So let me just give you one example of how this applies to my site. When you set forth, you know, the MCLs for PFOA and PFOS for rulemaking, I couldn't be happier. We're so happy. When I heard about the hazardous index approach, I was really thrilled. I said, wow, this is brilliant. You know, you're using what exists and you're really incorporating and you're doing a good job to say, let's lay the foundation for mixtures. So I went and I took the little formula and I said, how does this affect me? How does it affect surrounding communities, Bedford, Amherst, Londonderry? How does it affect people I know in other states? So I started asking around. And I said, can you plug your numbers in? I know the testing data in this state. I'm a clinical social worker, but I'll tell you, I've had to become my own PFAS expert because in the beginning, any support, guidance, and information, nothing was satisfactory. So we have done a lot. So just to give you an example, when I look at the hazardous substance index, and the best argument I can make for class regulation is, aside from the soundbite that you hear from all of us, we're exposed as a class, so we need to treat it as a class, right? That's a simple concept. I know it's not that simple. You have to defend your actions. But I was very concerned when I realized what was on the list of hazardous index, comparison and what wasn't. And what I noticed right away is the 4 PFAS, in addition to PFOA, that we find here in the greatest quantities, which are the same lineage of what you have on that list, but they're almost, I think of it as, we see those PFAS family trees, and we have the PFOS, area, and then we have the PFOA area, right? So I think it's my opinion that the fluoropolymer industry is very powerful, and it almost seems that they're being protected. So PFBA, PFPEA, PFHPA, and PFHXA, those 4 have consistently appeared in our water at higher levels than the 4 in your hazardous index. We also see some of them breaking through the GAC systems that we've put millions of dollars into. So I'm a big believer in, if we're going to spend money, whoever's money it is, we need to spend it. This is not acceptable. We have a lot of sick people here and lots of sad stories everywhere you look. So we need to spend that money wisely. So what at the EPA is the nation turns to you. What you regulate and what you set forth becomes the design for the engineering. So groundwater is our drinking water source in this area. Groundwater is not really treated by RO, it's treated by other systems. So if we only look at what you are setting forth to regulate, we aren't improving our water quality here, because the PFBA and PFHPA in particular are breaking through. Not only are they breaking through, but what's going into our system, we can look at that raw water in the wells that are closest to Saint-Gobain in particular. Then we can measure the water that comes out of our system with fresh, new medium and designed, and everything's running smoothly. It's coming out higher than it's going in. So not only do we need some technical guidance, we need regulations that include more than you've set out to, because we don't have any rights. So we cannot get our water cleaned to the extent we need it to. We cannot get it designed properly unless, we can't roll up our sleeves and do this ourselves. We can raise a barn in New Hampshire and people will pitch in, but we cannot do this. So, what you're doing is a great foundation, but until we acknowledge a fully fluorinated carbon atom is a PFAS, that's another pet peeve of mine. We have to look at what is a PFAS, what's in the drinking water. UCMR5 is behind. It's great that you extended the panel, but Eurofins has a 70 PFAS test that I can put some water and put it in. There's things that are coming up on that test panel in our water here that isn't even going to be counted in UCMR5. So those are just a few of my thoughts. What you're doing is phenomenal. You've made great progress in a short period of time. I know government doesn't work that way, and I'm really impressed on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm 7 years into this battle, and I would like to return to my life and ensure that everybody's safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. And John McCone is up next. John, feel free to unmute.
Hello. Hi, I'm John McCone. I'm from the Merrimack River Watershed Council. And thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate this forum and all the information you've provided. There's been some talk specifically about the Merrimack River and about Merrimack, New Hampshire, and that's my area of focus. And I'm sure there are other rivers like this across the country where we have these hot spots, such as been discussed with Saint-Gobain, where we know that there's a source of contamination that's coming across an open river. In the case of the Merrimack, downriver from this source, you have over 400,000 people, mostly in EJ communities, who are getting their primary drinking water from that river. And there is not sufficient testing and monitoring or tracking of what's actually happening within the river right now. And that's one area that we'd like to see improved. We're also looking at, what is happening with the wastewater treatment plant. Sounds like you're going to be addressing that. I hope that can be pushed along as quickly as possible. So anyways, thank you so much. I know you've got a bunch of people to get through. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, John. Kristen Mello, if you're ready.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity and thank you for holding this forum. I would just like to say, first of all, I'm from Westfield, Massachusetts, home of Barnes Air National Guard Base, which, the AFFF use resulted in the contamination of 4 municipal and dozens of private drinking water wells here in the city of Westfield. I want to applaud the proposal for federal limits. It's very important, especially for people who are not in Massachusetts and other states with regulations. It's very important for everyone else suffering to get a handle on this. And so I wholeheartedly support federal PFAS regulations, but I have to lend also my voice in support of the people who have asked you to please reconsider what a PFAS is, right? When OECD remade their definition, all of a sudden 6.3 million different PFAS existed in the world, right? Just because they redefined their, what they were calling a PFAS. And we need to get our minds wrapped around the structure activity relationships of different functional groups and PFAS that have been used for different reasons and different generations of PFAS. We need to group this together as a family, and we need to regulate them together, because otherwise we're never going to get through this. But I would also like to take my time to speak about the difference between approval and monitoring with prevention and protection. We really need no more PFAS approved. We have enough going on. There's enough going on. We need to stop where we are, stop making it worse, and begin to figure out how we're going to undo this. Also, I would not be me, and I know Kelsey's waiting for it. The EPA Region 1 has been very responsive to me in the last week. We have a RCRA site out here in Westfield that is a historic chrome plating site, and it was open in the late 1800s, and they used to dump everything on site, and it's in a flood prone area, and there is an EJ community right next to it. And the thing is, it was beginning to be closed out in 2012. No one has ever tested it for PFAS. The city of Westfield has approved development over this site. It's going to move that groundwater plume. No one has ever looked at the groundwater plume because it's a RCRA site, and the RCRA site is EPA's domain, not Mass DEP's domain. And so even though Massachusetts has regulatory limits for PFAS that would trigger something in this area, it's based on EPA. And EPA, although you have been fabulous in sending me documents, and thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I've been ripping through them. There's no analytical data in the last 10 years, and nobody's looking. Nobody knows anything about this site, and EPA is agnostic on local zoning and building. And so there is nothing to stop them. There's no enforcement. And so as you look through things, I would like you to please think of protection as prevention and enforcement, not approval and monitoring. And thank you so much. And thank you for your engagement in Westfield.
Thanks, Kristen. Up next, Jennifer Peterson.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of Massachusetts Waterworks Association. Mass Waterworks represents public water systems in Massachusetts, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment on EPA's action plan. The presentation tonight shows how far-reaching the impacts of PFAS are. Water systems are regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and unfortunately are bearing the brunt of EPA's actions related to PFAS, not the responsible parties. EPA should focus on preventing PFAS from entering the environment and cleaning it up through other statutes that you discussed tonight. We support EPA's efforts in this regard. Regarding the CERCLA hazardous substance designation, Mass Waterworks and other organizations have gone on the record that CERCLA liability for PFOA, PFAS, and other PFAS, while important, as currently drafted, will place significant costs on local government, particularly water and wastewater systems, who are treating drinking water and wastewater to protect public health and the environment. Costs that will be borne by ratepayers. EPA needs to provide an exemption under CERCLA to utilities who did not cause the contamination, but are working hard to remediate it. Drinking water and wastewater PFAS treatment is very costly. I want to be very clear that the money allocated through the bipartisan infrastructure law is nowhere near sufficient to cover the costs that our water systems and their ratepayers are already facing. Massachusetts was projected to receive $87 million over the 5 years of the BIL funding. In FY23, the Massachusetts Drinking Water SRF allotment is $16 million for emerging contaminants. There's another $38 million over the next 2 years for the Small and Disadvantaged Communities Grant Program. In Massachusetts, where we have a drinking water standard, $149 million in funding has already been committed for 24 projects to help systems address a maximum contaminant level of 20 parts per trillion, far above the level that EPA is proposing. The most recent intended use plan was just released yesterday. And let me give you some of the anticipated PFAS project costs. $20 million for Bellingham, $5.6 million in Franklin, $23 million in Rainham, $16 million in Acton, $32 million in Webster. These are just a small subset of the projects on the list. And as you can see, the BIL funds will be exhausted very quickly. While there is some grant funding available, the majority of these projects are loans to be paid back by the ratepayers. We need additional funding to support our water systems in addressing this issue. Mass Waterworks has already submitted a request to EPA to extend the public comment period for the draft drinking water standard by 90 days, giving the public 60 days to look at a docket with 1,300 supporting documents, including 26 key support documents that total 5,000 pages in length is not sufficient. And I'll close by saying that risk communication for PFAS is very challenging. EPA has committed to assisting states and local government with risk communication, but the products to date and the agency's own communications have not been particularly helpful. There's been much focus on communicating how to reduce risk through drinking water, but very little on how people can reduce risk in other areas of their daily lives. We look forward to working with EPA to address the enormous issues that PFAS have caused, but we definitely need additional support for our communities in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, we have Mike Bald. Feel free to unmute.
Hello, thank you. I'll keep my video off just to save the bandwidth. So you can hear me, I assume.
We can,
I just
yes.
want to say, great, thank you. I just want to say thank you to all of you on the basically doing the important work. So Mr. Cash, Ms. Forbes, the commissioner, thank you all. I think the council can accomplish some good things. I'm glad you have a timeline. I'm in central Vermont. I'm self-employed. I think the timeline idea is important because we don't have time for this. We need solutions. We need them now. I say that because I read a book in 1992, Our Stolen Future by Theo Colburn, and it talked then about human sperm counts being down 50% from what they were in the 1930s. So that's what it was 30 years ago. I have no idea what it is today, but that's not a good trend. Is that atrazine? Is that pesticides? Probably yes. And what is the PFAS component in pesticides? Nobody will tell us, at least not in Vermont. So I want to make sure you understand, all of you, that even though you're attempting to do good work, the trust bucket is essentially empty. That's not just because I'm a veteran and I've learned a few things, but there's zero trust is your start point. Because when we reach out to the Agency of Health or the Agency of Agriculture in Vermont, they won't tell us if there's PFAS in the pesticides. And I just know that I know for a fact the cover crops are killed with pesticide. The crop is dusted with pesticide 2 or 3 times. And then the harvest process includes pesticide. So how am I supposed to eat? Am I supposed to go buy bottled water for the rest of my life? I live near the railroad tracks. I can't get a straight answer as to how triclopyr and atrazine and dicamba, how do they react with creosote in the ties? So a lot of issues. I'm glad you have a timeline. I would like to say that if my name is going to be visible on these public participations, I'd like to know all the other participants as well, because that would help build my trust to know which corporations are involved here and who else is speaking or perhaps lobbying to be part of your vision. We do need a vision. Finally, I'll just say with regard to purchasing, I hope other federal agencies are listening in the world of purchasing products that don't contain PFAS, because the U.S. Forest Service and a lot of state agencies sure purchase a lot of pesticide, and then they use it all over the state, and who knows what's in that. So thank you for your time. Carry on.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for your service as well. So we're just waiting one moment here. Just a reminder, if you'd like to click on the prompt that comes up if you are interested in speaking. And we won't be responding to any questions tonight, but are taking notes on all of these questions and all the concerns that come up, and they will all be reviewed. We don't have anyone else prompted to speak at the moment. So at this point, we would like to open it up to others who had not registered to speak tonight. So if anyone else is interested in sharing additional feedback, please click on the raise hand button. And please keep your hand raised until you've had an opportunity to give your feedback. You can unmute your button when your name is called. And I will note that the participant list is on everyone's screen. I believe you can click on participants if folks are interested in reading the names of anyone else participating. So just again, a reminder that if anyone is interested in making a comment tonight and giving us feedback, please click on the raise hand button. And if you are joining via phone, you can press *9 to share a comment. I would like to give it one more minute because I know we had others that had registered to speak. Okay, Mike Bald, I see you'd like to add a comment there. Feel free to unmute and speak again.
Thank you, Kelsey. I see the participant list now, but only because I'm a panelist now. So I guess when you're just a regular participant, you don't see that.
I apologize. That was a misspeak on my part. The participant list is not viewable. You're correct. It's only the panelists there.
Okay, well, that was my point from my comment earlier, is that I hope that's a two-way street, that we all get to see who's taking part in the conversation. I can stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that. We can follow up with you as well. All right, we'll give it one more moment. If anyone has interest in speaking, you may raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, press *9. Okay, well, with that, feel free to continue to raise your hand while we are here. But at this point, I would like to turn it back over to Emma, who's going to share a few of the highlights from this evening's comments.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your comments this evening. And again, if you have any more comments, you feel free to raise your hand while we're still here if you want to make any remarks. Some of the general themes that we heard were, I think, about the MCL, adding additional PFAS into the MCL proposed rule. We also heard about the idea of regulating as a class, and of course, concerns about pesticides that we heard from Mike at the very end there. Seeing other feedback we have, looking at my notes. We heard about the importance of EPA's PFAS work to provide federal leadership on PFAS and to build on early efforts from our Region 1 states, but also a strong desire for EPA to go further. We heard about the importance of addressing PFAS as a class, not simply as one chemical at a time, particularly in the area of drinking water and our chemical safety programs. We heard specific concerns about PFAS impacted communities and sources within Region 1, including military bases, manufacturing facilities, and chromium plating facilities. We heard about the importance of improving our monitoring of PFAS, including in both drinking water and rivers, but also the need to move beyond monitoring and reduce PFAS pollution. We heard significant concerns about how to pay for the cost of PFAS treatment, especially the impacts on communities and ratepayers. We heard about the importance of preventing PFAS contamination in the first place and holding those responsible for contamination accountable and using EPA's enforcement tools. And we also heard about the importance of EPA taking action and setting clear deadlines in our work, as well as how important it is to communicate effectively about the risks of PFAS and to build trust with our communities. Thank you again for all of your feedback. I'll turn it back over to Kelsey. Oh, Kelsey, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So following today's session, I want to highlight that you may continue to share input after this event via email to pfascouncil@epa.gov. And as we noted earlier, first, the feedback you share with us, either orally or via email, will not be considered as part of the formal comment process for any specific action EPA is taking under the PFAS Strategic Roadmap. You can find more information on EPA's efforts on PFAS at EPA's website, which is www.epa.gov/PFAS. On that site, you can also find links to each of the major actions EPA is taking under the PFAS roadmap, and where appropriate, links to the formal comment opportunities for each action through an online docket. And second, we do not plan to individually respond to the comments we receive, but we do plan to synthesize what we've learned from each of our regional sessions, as well as the April 6th session for tribes, to inform EPA's future work on PFAS. Next slide, please. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us tonight, and a special thanks to those of you who shared feedback with us today. I'd also like to thank our regional administrator and EPA PFAS Council co-chair, David Cash, and our Region 1 colleague, Emma Forbes, for joining us as well and for tonight's presentations. Thank you all and have a great night.